All right, I'm just gonna start streaming.
All right, press record.
Oh, you finally hit record. Okay. I know it's a hard train turn, but I bought my trains. I'm good to go.
Come back. It'll be fine. It's one share. It's not going to make or break the...
Watch at the end of the game, it literally made or broke you.
Well, whatever.
All right. We're good to go here. It's Tuesday, December 29th, 2020. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is GeekNights. Tonight, we are talking about the last 10 years of games.
Any opening bits?
Oh, fuck. Do I have any opening bit?
Mm.
Nothing. God damn it.
Not working.
I'm working this week.
I spent my time playing with old computers.
I did some work on some projects, but nothing that'll bear fruit yet. Tuesday. Well, the listener's hanging out in there. Let's, open bit.
Pretty much it.
Maybe I'll start with the Star Wars thing. Like, I've been playing some games again. They're not Overwatch. So I'm working this week, but it's like the low-key week where like no one's in. Well, because I saved all my vacation days and my job doesn't just close for the end of the year like yours does.
Where my work is closed.
If I ran a company, it would fucking close from like Christmas to New Year's every year.
My previous company and current company closed. I would not work somewhere if they were not closed.
If I had a company, it would also close in like the peak month, like the peak of summer. There'd be like a 2-week, we're just closed, go to the beach. But that's because I'm a good person. Man, but I've had a lot more free time because I finished a bunch of other projects and I got a bunch of things set up, and I basically have been playing a lot of non-Overwatch video games again. It's kind of weird.
Okay.
But what I've been playing a lot of again is Star Wars Squadrons.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, Star Wars Squadrons, like we reviewed it already. The game's great. Like it's everything I wanted. But we were, I think the game industry term was dog shit at it in terms of our actual play. Like when me and Scott, like all of us tried to play. So since the update, that is no longer true.
I think that what is if anything has happened, they have simply fixed matchmaking.
There's a few things they fixed. So if you haven't played Star Wars,
our bodies didn't suddenly change. We didn't practice it, right? There's no way we got better at it overnight.
I actually did practice and got better. I've been playing a bunch of solo, and I was practicing certain kinds of things and forcing myself to play the A-Wing and the TIE Interceptor even when I was losing and my team was sucking, partly because of me. And it was starting to pay off. I also did read a lot more tutorials on things. Like I learned how to microdrift pretty well. Like I can do those like weird, like 90 degree turns like around an asteroid, like really reliably now. But what really happened is this update. Remember, when they released this game, they definitely were like hedging their bets because they said things like the game is coming out, but it's as is. Like we're not going to invest more in the game. There aren't going to be new ships.
The people who are working on it at what it was, that company in Canada, right, is like it's published by EA, but this other company made it, and they're basically like, okay, you guys are done now, right? We're done paying you money. You made it. It's released. The end.
Yep.
Right.
And it was
buy it for $40 or don't.
But it was very popular, and I think they realized that, or whatever decision-making process internally went from, well, let's hedge our bets to, okay, the game's big. Let's actually invest more into it. And they made a lot of balance changes, a lot of bug fixes, and they seem to have fixed the matchmaking. Because one thing that is very different now is we are playing against people who are around our skill level.
Yeah, matchmaking is of course always super huge in any game that is skill based with not a lot of luck, because you know if you got Wedge Antilles out there, right, you're just in trouble, right?
Yep.
If you're not, you know.
And but what's interesting is the changes they made, the balance changes, not so much the matchmaking, but the balance changes. They change in ways that's hard to describe, and I'm still inspecting as I play, and I think about why it feels so different. It changed the way the game feels to play, and it feels a lot more like the old TIE Fighter game. And it seems to mostly focus around things like they tweaked a bunch of the weapons to where that one rotary like burst cannon thing is not just the god of the game anymore.
That's good.
They did some oddly specific things like that charge up cannon now. When you're charging it, you take double damage until you release to prevent people from using it to joust. So it can only really be used when you're chasing someone as a Winmore or like attacking a capital ship. Like if you're going head on against someone, that weapon is a mistake. They also changed the way the capital ships interact with starfighters and how they target, such that if you're going fast and maneuvering a lot, it actually takes them a lot longer to lock onto you, and it's harder for them to shoot
I was
you.
under the impression that like the Star Destroyers and the capital ships basically weren't actually like shooting. They were just sort of like, saying, calculating like, is there an enemy within range? Right, damage them, this percent, over time, whatever, right, or stuff like that.
No, they just work like a normal ship.
Yeah, I don't know about
They've got all those turrets. Those turrets all fire independently, and it has logic for what to target. And it basically, if you're going fast and maneuvering more,
it calculates. Okay, this X-wing has been within the range of the Star Destroyer for X seconds. All right, animate the turret, shooting it, guaranteed hitting it, and doing this much damage. Right? It's like.
It's not guaranteed hitting it, for one.
Yeah.
It's actually, like, it's very clear if you watch how they behave in-game. Like, you go to the training mode and mess with it a little bit, that it seems to do a very simple system of prioritizing targets. It doesn't seem to do a lot of logic there, but it does prioritize targets. And it basically seems to disperse its fire among the valid targets within its zone that it has gotten a lock on, and it has the targeting system has some sort of logic where it takes it longer to lock based on how fast you're going and how much you're maneuvering. So the end result, and I tested this a bunch, was that if you fly straight at it by yourself, you see, like, in the distance, it'll suddenly fire all of its turrets that can see you at you, and this big salvo just, like, comes at you and only you. But if you come at it with a bunch of ships, it targets all of them at the same time and shoots like a little bit at all of them. But if one of the ships you're coming in with is faster than the other ones, it doesn't target the faster ship for a while. And I confirmed this experimentally by playing. The end result of all these changes, though, like I cannot stress enough, if you bounced off of this game because it felt too hard, the game just feels way more fun to play. And all these balance changes basically made all the different playstyles kind of work. Like, it's kind of shocking how all these tweaks have made the game feel completely differently when you're actually playing it.
Small changes make a big difference.
Yeah. And as a result, I'm diving into this game pretty hard now. Like, I'm playing it almost every day. This game is great.
All right.
So what do you got? Got any news?
Not really. It's not like people are releasing games on the holiday, right? They release them before the holiday to sell for the holiday. But yeah, I've been playing this game. I saw this game at PAX many years ago, at least a few years ago, when it was like super new, not even out yet. And it's been in every PAX I've been to since then. At least video game PAXs, right? Somewhere it had a booth. They were showing it off. And I said, that game looks kind of interesting. I'll probably play that one day. And that day came. So the game is Graveyard Keeper. It's a game that, it's pixely kind of art. It's got sort of LucasArtsy kind of humor, that kind of thing, right? And it's sort of like a Harvest Moon situation, but you are a Graveyard Keeper. And that's all I knew about it. So now that I've played it a bunch, I haven't beaten it yet. It's pretty interesting. And there's also some not good things, right? So the good thing about it that makes it different from all the other Harvest Moons, Rune Factories, Stardew Valleys, all those sorts of things, right? Is let's say you're playing Rune Factory, and there's a whole bunch of different systems in all these games, right? You got your farming, you got your dating, you got right. There's no dating in Graveyard Keeper, but there's other stuff, right? You got dungeoning sometimes, all kinds of systems, but usually you sort of have to or feel like you have to keep up on all the systems. Like in Rune Factory, there's like a day, right? The day goes around, and as you plant some crops, you got to water them every day. If you miss a day, they'll be shittier crops, right? So every day you have to water them. Every day. And then if they grow, you got to harvest them at the exact right day. Otherwise, then they start to rot, right? And you sort of have to keep, if you got animals, you got to feed them daily, or you got to brush the animals daily.
Like, it's a game loop that I have never in my life been able to engage with without getting mad at. And as I get older, I have even less patience for.
Right. So what Graveyard Keeper does is very interesting in that it's the same sort of game mechanics, right? It's like, okay, get, the materials in a Minecrafty sort of way, right? Chop a tree, take a log, build the building to process the log into planks, 5 planks and 3 bits of metal makes a desk or some shit like that. The same usual thing, right? You need 10 pumpkins to do this. So you go to you plow some land, you plant some pumpkin seeds that you bought, right? You put some fertilizer first, right? Same shit you do with all these other games. But while there is a day and a week, this sort of fictional weekly calendar where there's like a different symbol for each day, there is no pressure on anything. It's like there are
thanks, Satan.
There are quests that you're trying to accomplish. For example, like the astrologer. It'll be like, all right, the astrologer needs some acid to repair a book, right? You can just get him the acid whenever the fuck. You could just do everything else in the game, and just whenever you feel like getting the acid, you can do it, right? He's always, the astrologer's only there once a week on a particular day, but you can just do it whenever. The quest never goes away. If you need, say, some pumpkins to make the acid, which you don't, I'm just making an example.
That makes me more interested in this game because that's why I can't engage with Stardew Valley.
Right. Let's say you need some pumpkins for something, right? The witch actually had a quest where you needed to bring her a pumpkin, right, to make it big. So you dig some land, right? You plant your pumpkin seed. Then you can just go focus. Let's say you want to focus on this other quest where you needed, I don't know, you want to build up you want to make your graveyard nicer for the priest, right?
Yeah.
So you just go spend like a whole bunch of days working on your graveyard, just ignoring the pumpkins. You just forgotten about them. You're not playing the farming system. You're only playing the graveyard system because that's what you feel like doing right now. So you fully focus on doing this graveyard stuff, getting stones, carving them, putting them in the graveyard, getting bodies, embalming them, burying them, right? You're you're interacting with just the system that you're focused on right now, and you just forgot all about the farming system. You're not even touching it. Weeks in-game weeks have gone by. You haven't even checked the farm. When you're ready for the farm again, you're like, okay, my graveyard's perfect. I completed my graveyard-related quests. Let's go check on the farm. All the pumpkins are just sitting there. A+ pumpkins. They're just chilling, waiting for you. They're not rotten or anything, So there's many systems, and it is a very time-consuming game, but you could just pick which parts of the game you're going to focus on at any given moment and fully focus on those, and there's no FOMO with any other part of the game at any time, which is kind of nice. And that's, I think, what kept me playing it, right? Bad parts of this game. There's a lot of systems and there's quests relating to all the systems with all this plots and characters. And I think partially it's because I bought a bundle with all the DLCs. This game takes a long fucking time to play.
Well, the game is actually on sale right now for like under $7.
That's without the DLCs. But yeah, that's why I got it. Also, this game, I don't think there's of the characters in the game. I don't remember if there's any not white characters in this game. I don't think there are. You also can't even change your character. You're just this white beard dude, right? That's your character. Deal with it. Also, one of the characters is clearly a Romani type trading dude in the woods, and they referred to him with the G racial slur for that type of person. Basically, as if it's just a normal word. They don't even know. They don't, they're just using it like it's 1980 something, right? So that's a thing. But yeah, the only time pressure there is, I know I said there was no pressure. There is one thing in the game, it's not there at the beginning of the game, but eventually you get the ability to give sermons in the church. And that is that not only is going to be a very strong source of money, which is not that easy to get because you can't just sell all your stuff easily because there's supply and demand and shit like that. But it's also the only way that I know of to get the faith resource, which is needed for a lot of things. So, and you can only do it on, I guess, Sunday or the day of the week that has the sun symbol on it. So basically, even though there's no time pressure on anything, you do have to sort of keep an eye on the calendar and be like, oh, it's the Sunday. I have to go and just, go to the church and push the one button just to collect my faith, right? It's that sort of thing. And certain NPCs only appear one day of the week, right? The astrologer only is on the moon day. So if you have any astrologer related business, you got to wait for the moon day and remember. And if you miss it, it's not a big deal.
Just
It's
wait
like,
a
oh, no,
week.
you missed it. Yeah, it's like you just wait another week and then he'll be back, right? But it is a little bit annoying. It's like, all right, I guess I can't engage with that system. Wait another week before I can go continue that bit, right? So if you, it's single player only. So yeah, if you like that kind of thing, this is an okay game to play. It's not perfect. It's got some issues. Oh, another issue was clearly they didn't like not the game has got so many bits going on. I did some like plot stuff out of order, and like my character said some stuff that clearly they weren't supposed. Like I didn't learn. The character said some things as if they knew information, and then after that, I did a different quest and learned the information. And I'm like, the thing before you learn the thing. So there's it's not that polished in those sorts of areas. But yeah, it's I saw it at PAX and it looked interesting, and I keep playing it, so that's something.
All right, looks like it's on the Switch too, so maybe I'll play it on the Switch.
Maybe. I don't know if it could be good to play on the Switch. It's really a mouse and keyboard kind of situation.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to look at a video and see exactly how it works on the Switch. Because Slay the Spire is best on the Switch, but I don't know about all games.
A lot of manipulating inventory screens.
Oh, if it's just a bunch of like radial menus, I'm not going to be into that.
Oh, you mean on the Switch it'll be radial? No, I don't think
I wonder what it'll look like on the Switch.
I don't know what it looks like on the Switch. I imagine it looks the same and you just use your analog stick instead of a mouse or a touch screen or something.
That sounds actually horrible.
Yeah, it's a mouse and keyboard game, I think. But the other thing is that,
because the thing I never ever want to do is touch my Switch's screen, like ever.
Yeah. There's also, people talk about like quality of life in these sorts of games.
Oh, the listener says the Switch version has terrible load times too.
Okay,
noted.
That's good info. Good info.
Well then, it's under $7 on Steam, so I guess buy it on Steam if you're interested.
Well, that doesn't include the DLCs. But anyway, the last thing is that in terms of quality of life, the game does just make itself easy to play. Like you can eventually make zombies out of the dead bodies to do a lot of the work for you. So you don't have to do that anymore. And like you can just you start with a vineyard and you make grapes and then you make wine, but then you can get zombie vineyard and then you can get zombie wine making, right? And then you just have wine. You don't have to do anything, right? But there's also like you can build like little container trunks, right, in different areas. So let's say in your vineyard you build a trunk, and in the trunk you put your grape seeds and your fertilizer, right, and your trellises and whatever. Then when you go to do stuff in the grape area, it basically considers all that stuff to like be in your pocket. You don't have to like go get the stuff. Then it's just the stuff, you just do it, right? So it makes itself really convenient in that way. Less if you actually had to manage all the stuff individually instead of just dump all your equipment in the box and then go crafting, I would not have gotten anywhere in this game. I would have been like, fuck this shit.
Yep, that's the kind of thing. Like that's the kind of nonsense in Stardew Valley that just I keep bouncing off of that game hard, and I can just never deal with it.
After I've seen it, and I'm just never even gonna try it. But if you do like Stardew Valley, there are some of our listeners in our Discord who have been playing it multiplayer, starting around a week ago.
Yeah, they're not too deep in. Like you could get in on this.
Yeah, it's because it's vacation times, right? So I'm sure they would be happy to play with you, fellow listener. Multiplayer Stardew Valley going on.
Yeah.
Or if there's any other game you want to get going on, come to our Discord. Try to get a game going on.
So in some really brief news, I want to briefly review the Overwatch Winter Wonderland nonsense, because they always do these themed events. They'll like be special games in the arcade, like the non-ranked modes. Like there's a summer games thing, there's a winter thing, there's a Halloween thing. But they added some games and kind of changed things up in the winter game. And one thing I've noticed with all these sort of arcade modes is that they're making sometimes radical game design changes and experimenting a lot in there. And the quality of these games, the reason I bring this whole thing up, are actually getting really high just in the last year. Like they've started to find some gold with alternative modes. And the mode in particular that if you're interested in game design, I think you should look at is the freeze tag mode that they added. It's a 4-on-4 versus. Pick any characters you want, like whatever. And the game is just, if you kill a dude, they're frozen. You can unfreeze someone by standing next to him and holding use for like 4 seconds. And when one team's completely frozen, you win the round. It's best of 3. It's
wouldn't you just pick the DPS character to freeze people faster?
If your team wins a round, all the characters you used are now banned for you for the rest of this match.
Oh,
we picked the 4 great characters. Now what? Now what, fuckers?
well, hopefully, but if you lose, you can keep using them.
Yes.
So in the first battle, everyone's got the same 4 great characters.
See, that's the other thing. They don't, because the characters are all pretty well balanced. Like,
well, you might also do it like a tug of war where you have your anchors, right?
Yep.
You put them at the end. But point is, whichever team is like better, right? If a team is like doing better, they lose their characters, and then maybe that'll balance out, and the other team will get some wins.
It's similar to how Gun Game was often balanced, where as you get further along, you get crappier and crappier weapons.
And then you have to get your last kill with the knife.
Or the grenade.
It's hard to get that last kill with the knife. Like, you're the best player in the universe. All these shitty players still have M4s.
Yep.
You got your knife now.
But you're running at them with your knife, and they just hose you down over and over and over.
Even though you're way better than they are, you're already on knife, but...
So funnily enough, Overwatch added a gun game mode in that arcade a while ago, and it is also like fantastic.
How many guns are in Overwatch?
Well, the way it works is every time you have to get a kill with every character.
Oh, that makes more sense.
And the last character is the like entirely healing character that has like a little pistol and nothing else.
Yeah.
But they randomize the order of the rest of the characters along the way, which leads to some interesting bottlenecks. Like, a lot of people hit the sniper and just can't get past the sniper, and they sit there the whole game sniping.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But if you haven't played, like, if you play Overwatch competitively and you haven't looked in that, like, casual area in a while, there is some, like, really good game design in that casual arcade part of Overwatch that I think a lot of people are sleeping on that you should not sleep on. They're fantastic.
Well, this is just sort of like an extension of what you had in, say, the Counter-Strike world, where
With the
people make
mods.
Right? And those would be like Pokemon server or some shit like that.
Or the WoW mod to Counter-Strike was the one that always unnerved me the most.
Server. Yeah, there'd be stuff like that, but this is like same thing, only made by the people who made the game.
Yeah, it's like if only professional modders, and they're only giving you the best they think they've got.
It would be cool though if there was also community mods somehow, but also polished, right? And not just top down.
Yep. The trick is there's a lot of trickiness to that.
You think about like Dota. Dota was community mod, right? So
yep. You can make custom servers.
As hell, and it still is.
Yep. You can make custom servers up to a point that are pretty customizable, but yeah, beyond that, I don't know if I'm that interested in what the community would make just yet.
No.
I remember what happened to TF2 with the mods.
Mm-hmm.
Tribes 2. I said TF2 because I have a web page open with TF2 because I was going to talk about that in our main bit. But anyway, it's time for Things of the Day. So check this. Mario Paint was a game I was obsessed with getting when I was a kid because even in the SNES era, I was deep in PC gaming. And what always pissed me off about games like SimCity on the SNES was that I didn't have a mouse.
I was just playing some little bit of SimCity for like a minute on my Mac Plus over here.
Ooh. I have this weird urge to play SimCity 2000 again.
Yeah, me too. Too bad it's not multiplayer.
Nope. I don't think it would be good multiplayer. You know how you play that multiplayer? You just both play single player, and after an hour, you compare your cities.
I'll be on cheetah mode in that way.
So Mario Paint was the Super Nintendo game that came with the Super Nintendo mouse. So I was fucking upset. I remember, that was like top of my Christmas list of, Mom, just give me this game. That's all I want is this game. I want nothing else but the Mario Paint. Because my kid brain thought that the mouse would work with any SNES game where that would make sense, which obviously is not true.
Not true.
But Mario Paint was fantastic for its era. Like, that was a weird thing for Nintendo to put out on the Super Nintendo. And you might think, but Rim, you had a computer. Yeah, computers were not great at things back then. Mario Paint was actually better than a lot of the kid drawing software you would ever have access to on a PC.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's like
this was 1992.
Right. At the time Mario Paint came out, right? What were you going to have for drawing software on your computer? Basically MS Paint, Mac Paint, right? That like, what was there? There was like Print Shop
Yep.
Deluxe.
Or you want to make music? Unless you pirated like Cakewalk Studio, you got nothing.
That existed in 1992.
I don't know when Cakewalk even came out.
But you'd be making music with like, Commodore 64 MIDI stuff, right? At that time, stuff like that.
Yeah. So
I guess 92, a little bit later than that.
But Mario Paint basically had baby's first music making program coupled with baby's first drawing program and baby's first animation where you could like make legit animations. Like this Mario Paint, there was a lot going on. But
if you tried to use a computer from 1990, even 1993, like a 386,
yeah,
a 386 or like a Mac like LC or something like that, maybe a Mac Quadra, that kind of.
Maybe you're drawing in a logo, as the listener just pointed out.
Yeah, it could be like Mac. It would be like Mac OS 7, I think, 7 or 8, maybe around that time. Probably 7 something. It's like, yeah, you could do some stuff, but first of all, those computers would cost thousands and thousands of dollars.
All right, Cakewalk came out for DOS in 1987.
Okay, not bad.
Holy shit, this DOS interface. Oh my God, I've never seen the Cakewalk DOS version
Mario
before.
Paint definitely was a thing where the absolute power of it was not that high, but within the constraints it provided, computationally, right? They were able to make a vastly superior user interface within which you could still do a lot, right? It was, and because it was easier, you could, even though it was computationally less powerful, someone who was, a kid could do more in Mario Paint than they could do in like Photoshop, right? If you gave that same kid, today's Photoshop, they probably wouldn't be able to do as much with it, some 8-year-old, right? An 8-year-old could probably make better music and better animation in Mario Paint than they could in, After Effects or GarageBand or whatever.
But Mario Paint also lets you save your drawings. You could save your big drawing. You could save your animation.
You ran out of save space eventually.
No, it was you could only save one drawing, one song, and one animation.
Save space. Yeah.
So it wasn't save space. It was whatever you had is what you had when you log back in. So it only had 32 kilobytes of save RAM. And an astute person, this YouTube channel, Bushy Tail, is where this person actually like thought about this and wondered what would happen and tested it. I don't think anyone ever like thought of this before, but they basically figured out that all the pixels combined and all the minimum possible footprint of all the files that you could make in this game is way more than 32 kilobytes. So the game definitely had to be doing some compression on these images, which sure.
So yeah.
So what they did is they tried to make images and animations with as much entropy as possible to see if they could make something that Mario Paint could not save. And they were successful in doing this. And Mario Paint actually had logic to detect and handle this. And this is a video of exactly what happens if you try to save Mario Paint when there is too much entropy to compress your images. And the little robot animation just gives up and says data overflow and plays a special sound. And then the game crashes.
My best memory of Mario Paint, even though I did not own a Super Nintendo at the time and did not own Mario Paint, I played it at a kid's house who had it. And we made an animation of MC Hammer, but it was only his pants dancing.
Ooh.
It was just 2 legs with big balloon pants, doing like, dancing back and forth.
I made a lot of like Mario World looking levels with like Mario jumping around and picking up a Yoshi and stuff.
And of course, Fly Swatting Game, right?
Yep, Fly Swatting Game, which existed solely to teach people how to use a mouse, because Nintendo was worried that people who bought this game had never encountered a mouse before.
Same thing, Microsoft made Solitaire for the same reason.
And the best part of this video is there's not many comments, like 400, but not many people care about this. But at the very bottom, there's a comment that says, wait, that's the origin of the bot and his song? I thought it was from Mario Maker.
Okay, so also a Nintendo thing of the day. I don't know if I've used this before. I don't remember it. This is actually a video the video's from 91, so around I guess before Mario Paint, right? And it was uploaded to YouTube in 2009. So, and it has millions of views, but I don't remember seeing it until recently. So there you have it. And what this is, it's a video that Nintendo of America, right? And people got to remember, Nintendo of America mostly is concerned with, marketing and distribution. They don't really make the games there or anything, right? It always has been that way, sales, right? That sort of thing. And it was a video that Nintendo of America made in the early 90s for retailers, right? Because you weren't buying shit online. You were buying all the shit at a store, Toys R Us, department store, right? And it was for retailers who didn't know shit about, video games, right? They're just selling them.
And back when retail would like provide services like help you pick something, explain how something works, teach you how to use the thing.
Right. And it was to educate retailers about technical support for Nintendo products, because if somebody had a tech support problem with a Nintendo product in the early 90s and they were not technologically inclined, what the fuck were they going to do? Right? My Nintendo doesn't work. Who are they going to call? Right?
There was that number in the back of every Nintendo game manual.
Like, there were no cell phones, right? You were calling on your regular landline phone, some like 800 number, right?
There was the Nintendo support hotline.
Yeah, there was no Google though, right? That you could search for answers. Right?
Yep.
A lot of people were just going to take their shit back to the store and try to return it and get a new one or some shit like that, right? Rather than try to figure it out. And plus, back in those days, like hooking stuff up to a TV wasn't just an HDMI cable, right? Some guys need some like RF adapter. Who knows what you needed back then?
Well, you needed an RF adapter unless you were the fanciest motherfucker, and then you could plug RCA directly into those ports on the side of the NES.
That's right. But yeah, first of all, in this video, you're seeing Nintendo's training with these actors pretending to be stupid customers, or not always stupid customers, but, exaggerated customers, or extremely or the far too knowledgeable and too skilled retail employee. Right? And it's to educate retailers about what they should do, how they should handle customers who try to bring Nintendo products in with problems and whatnot, right? But also in this video, right, you're sort of seeing this unrealistic retail setup where like there's this wall of NES games.
That's actually literally what the store I went to looked like.
And I was about to say, the only thing unrealistic about that is not that there is a wall of NES games. It's only that the wall is so clean and organized.
Yeah.
Right? When I would go to Toys R Us back in the day, there was a wall of paper slips.
Yep.
Little pictures of the boxes. You would take the paper slip to this booth they had. And
that booth had like bulletproof glass, and there was the wall of actual games in there.
In that booth was literally Nintendo games of every Nintendo game just in stacks piled to the ceiling.
And even worse, if there were no paper slips under a game you wanted, that game was sold out. Fuck you.
Yep. But
we always went and asked anyway, like, you sure you don't have a copy of Mario 3?
Each one of those cartridges was 50 late 80s, early 90s dollars, ish.
50 to 70.
And they were stacked to the ceiling. There was a lot of money in that booth. That's why they didn't just leave them out. You had to get the piece of paint, right?
Like, I remember at Toys R Us, the games, there were $30 games, but that was like Hogan's Alley. There were $45 games, was like the normal games, 45 or 50. And then 60 to 70 was like hot game on release, like Zelda 2 or Mario 3.
And the worst thing was that, in those days, nowadays, shovelware is like, the shovelware still exists. It existed then, it existed before. Nintendo did see what shovelware did to the Atari and reduced it significantly by not licensing it. But there was still a lot of bad games out there.
The SNES actually probably had more shovelware than the NES.
Maybe, probably. But, shovelwares today, you can tell, and also it's $1, right? It's not a big deal if you accidentally buy a shovelware. And the NES, if you bought a shovelware, that was $50 down the toilet.
Yep, that's why the smart kids went to Blockbuster and rented games first.
That's right.
Or in a later era, the Funko Land, also known as free babysitting.
Yes. But hey, I just want people who weren't alive then to see that beautiful wall.
That wall. I can smell some of these images.
I can smell the inside of the
box. It's like... It still boggles my mind to this must be what people who like were born before electricity felt like when there's electricity everywhere. Like, I just think back to like this was my literal reality and what it was like to live in that world compared to this world.
Yep.
In the meta moment, we're stuck at home. Not much is going on that we can talk about news-wise, like fuck Mitch McConnell. Check out our code of conduct. Join the GeekNights Discord. Hang out in our live streams. There's cool people hanging out in there every show. Yeah, our forum's good. Our Discord's good.
Twitters. You can email us, I guess, if you wanna.
Yeah, we're hanging out online, playing games with people. I'm
individually, or you can follow GeekNights itself on all the places that you can follow people on the internet.
Yep, we got stuff everywhere. We're working on some projects. Some are big, some are small. Some you'll see early in the new year. Some you may never see, hence we're not talking about them. We don't really have any cons coming up. I guess there's that virtual MagFest, but I still don't know what the deal is. They haven't really posted much.
I don't know what the deal is with that either. We got no info.
Yeah. There's some other online cons that'll probably be happening next year that we're talking to. But if there is an online con that you want us to appear at in some fashion, and that con is not a pain in the ass to work with, tell them about us or tell us about them, and we'll see what happens.
The book club book is still The Tale of Genji.
I have not lit the Genji signal.
The Genji signal has not the whatever the.
Well, because I'm I have not lit the beacons because I'm.
That's right. The beacon of Gondor remains.
Because I've got my hot ass and I'm playing Star Wars, so I'm gonna keep playing Star Wars instead of reading The Tale of Genji for the time being.
Yeah, I told Rim I'm reading the book. No, actually, I'm just watching Lupin movie. Did you watch the Lupin movie?
Not yet, but I will before our next Wednesday show.
All right, well, it's gonna be next year.
It will be next year. All right, let's get right into it because all these shows, these end of decade shows have been going long. We've already gone long, so we'll go long again.
All right.
This has been, I will just say that in terms of gaming, all kinds of gaming, the 2010s have been like an amazing decade.
The best decade in human history.
It is hard to express to you out there, especially if you are younger than us, how fucking amazing this decade has been for gaming. This is a decade where the Wii U came and went, where the 3DS came and went. Counter-Strike Go appeared.
Yep.
The PC gaming, the renaissance of PC gaming began at the very beginning of this decade and turned into a PC gaming like platinum age. This is the greatest PC gaming era in human history hitherto.
It's true.
The Nintendo Switch like changed the paradigm of what a console is. The Wii U tried but failed.
It's already several years old. It doesn't even feel like it, but it's old.
Like I was trying to think back, like what happened in the 2010s in gaming, and
everything.
We could do a podcast. We could make a GeekNights podcast for a year that was just talking about the 2010s of gaming, and we would not run out of content.
We did it for 10 years.
We did do it for 10 years.
We could just listen to all these episodes. It's like,
we could have done more episodes in these 10 years.
The point is that in 2009, 2010, what did gaming look like? You know, it looked like then, I'm pretty sure it was Xbox 360, right?
Yeah.
Is it regular DS, not 3DS? Regular
3DS did not come out yet.
I don't think 3DS was quite out.
Here, I was looking at 2010 in video games. Look at the website 2009 in video games.
The Wii was out. The Wii was a thing because the Wii was late 2000s. So the Wii was still at its strength, right?
The Wii was strong, but it was in its long decline. Like everyone knew Nintendo had something coming.
Right. So the Wii was there. The regular DS was there. The
PS3 Slim came out at the end of the previous decade, 2009, in September.
PS3, Xbox 360, right?
Yep.
And at this time, you know, forget all the things that have happened between then and now, right? At that moment, it was actually like sort of it wasn't exactly the beginning, but like it was still the early times of just indie video games, period, right? The Xbox was like before that. Obviously, the indie games have always existed, right? There have been games from non-major publishers.
Yeah,
forever.
but that Xbox indie marketplace that is gone.
Exactly.
That was not a thing, and PC indie games were hard to run and weird still.
Steam just didn't let anyone fucking put their games on Steam, right? It wasn't like there wasn't this itch.io didn't exist, that's for sure. At least not that I'm aware of, right?
A lot of indie games I played in the 2000s, the knots, were like, here's an exe file from the internet.
Right, exactly. If you indie video games where someone made a game and they're selling it on their own, right? That Xbox marketplace was like the first time that you could on a major platform, pretty much anyone could get their game up there and get it for sale. And we were seeing the games, coming out, like, I guess the early ones, like the Braid.
Braid was right at the end of 2009.
Right. You see like your Monaco, right? We saw that at PAX a whole bunch.
We saw that at PAX many, many, many times. I still have those diamonds.
Right. Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
I guess what else was coming out around then? But like it was still like these early days where people starting to be like, hey, I made a video game all on my own. What was Half Minute Hero was one of those?
Oh yeah, that game was phenomenal.
Right. It was like people just made a game out of nowhere all on their own.
Yep.
And because they had this store to sell it on, it's like, oh, well, you can actually sort of like make money making a game on your own if you're lucky and it becomes a huge hit. Most of them won't. But that became a thing. And for the rest of the decade, we are now in a place where, especially thanks to Steam, the Xbox One died. But like on Switch, you get shit nowadays like fucking, Cadence of Hyrule.
Yeah.
Crypt of the Necrodancer wasn't a thing in 2010, and now Cadence of Hyrule in 2020 is a thing.
In fact, you know what I'm going to say? You know what happened in the 2010s, this decade? It destroyed the concept of game genres. Like, the concept's still there, but there were so many genre breakers and new genres that formed that like...
There still is the concept of genres that are really strong, but there's
a lot more of them, and there's a lot more games that are described as it's this genre and this genre mixed.
Yes.
Which was not a thing you saw a lot before then.
We've also seen several genres die or wane, right? So the biggest death has been the MMORPG, at least the classical kind.
The grindy kind.
Right. The Final Fantasy one, and what's that other one people are playing? The Chinese one? I forget.
That doesn't narrow it down.
It's that one that's like a big hit, the actiony one. I forget. Regardless, it's like the World of Warcraft style MMO. Like, is it 100% dead? No, of course not. They're still there. But it's like in 2010, like it was like there was a Lord of the Rings MMO.
Yeah.
It was like so many MMOs. It was, the Elder Scrolls one. Does that one still exist? There was a Star Wars.
I mean, let's put this in context.
Were there 2 Star Wars ones? I don't even know.
At the end of the previous decade, my primary PC was Linux on the desktop, and I was playing like Wii games, and I was mostly tabletop, and PC gaming was not in a great shape because Team Fortress 2 had come and was not good. Like Left 4 Dead 2 was one of the last hurrahs of the end of that decade.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our video game episodes from 2010, a lot of them were about old games. The only major PC game I see is like Civ 5.
Yep. But then as you scroll through more episodes we did, like, we're talking about a lot of interesting games.
Right. 2011, there's Half Minute Hero. Rock of Ages, that was another early indie game, right? Super Meat Boy, another one. That was 2011, right?
Yep.
Finally, Super Meat Boy Forever comes out now. It just came out.
So another big, I want to jump around to a lot of different places before we go deep into anything. Another big change. Tabletop exploded in multiple ways. Like D&D over this decade coalesced into 5th edition, which for all its problems, is probably the best D&D.
Yeah, I mean, D&D itself had a lot of ups and downs.
4th edition was just a nightmare.
Yeah, what we've seen, I think, as a whole is the emergence of the watch people play an RPG, usually D&D, not always though.
Yep.
Online.
Which led to this renaissance of people interested in playing the games.
That didn't exist at all in 2010, even though it could have.
Yep, it could have, it should have. We're stupid. Hindsight.
but now it totally exists and is huge. There are several people that do it, right?
But look, at the beginning of 2010, we have Luke and Jared on the show, like in July. We have them on multiple times talking about indie RPGs. We were really diving into indie RPGs. The indie RPG scene has really come into its own in this past decade. There are so many top tier indie RPGs out there.
Yep. I think it still hasn't managed to like chip away at these sort of like
No, you know what I think happened? The whole space expanded because the space had contracted for a long time. I think tabletop RPGs expanded overall, so D&D grew a lot, but indie RPGs also grew a lot relative to where they were at the previous decade.
Right, but I think in terms of percentage of the pie, it's like D&D is still like
indie RPGs are a smaller percentage of the pie, but a larger absolute number. More people are making enough money doing indie RPGs to make indie RPGs.
Yes, indeed.
It's still not a healthy ecosystem, but it's growing rapidly and it's growing in absolute numbers. Even if D&D is still the monolithic elephant with a flurry of blows in the room.
And the other thing, I think that the story of regular tabletop in the 2010s, I think, is absolutely got to be like very heavily tied to the story of the Kickstarter board game.
The
right?
Kickstarter, the Kickstarter caused a renaissance of unknown designers and indie games coming out, but it also caused a glut of shovelware.
Relative to other project types, board games are like one of the biggest on Kickstarter. Like there's disproportionate money for board gaming projects compared to like movie funding projects, right? Even though they're both valid uses of Kickstarter. And we saw early in the decade, what do I see here on GeekNights, right? Like Eminent Domain and like some other, games that were like some of the early Kickstarter games, right? And now it's like friggin' every board game is some sort of Kickstarter thing. They're all, the whole industry is about making, a giant game with a bunch of extras in it and all kinds of miniatures.
But I feel like over the course of the decade, that bubble grew and kind of burst right at the end of the decade.
I think it's definitely deflating now, finally. At least I hope it is.
It seems to be. But what's rising now is the industry there's a lot of shovelware, there's a lot of bad.
1 year it's playing games online and digitally instead of right. It's always existed, but it was never like good enough, and you wouldn't do it because you could just play games in person, right?
Yep.
But now it's getting better, and also the pressure of not being able to play games in person has actually finally pushed that up, right?
But the other thing I've seen accelerate massively in this past decade was people who are more casual and more mainstream tabletop gamers playing the kinds of games that in the previous decade they would never encounter in their lives.
Oh yeah.
Like Root is there's a lot of games that are a good example, but Root's probably the most well-known one. Root got a lot of people to try grognard wargame mechanics without realizing it. And
I definitely feel like at the start of the decade, it was like, okay, Settlers has managed to get its way into the hands of a lot of people, right? Catan.
Yep. Carcassonne was kind of well-known.
Right, but we're out here, we're playing, right? I don't know, fucking what was out then? Let me look.
Like Hanabi came out in 2010. I remember we gave fucking talks at PAXs where we were like, check this shit out. Like we talked about Hanabi like no one had ever made a game like that before because there weren't really games like that.
A show on Hanabi. I think it was later than that.
It came out in 2010. We didn't do a show on it right away.
We did it in 2013.
Seven Wonders came out in 2010.
Right. It's like we were in the Seven Wonders zone when everyone else was in the Catan zone, right?
Yep.
That's like toot our own horn here. It's just because we've been playing Settlers since 2000, just due to luck and circumstance, right?
Yep.
Privilege, obviously. So we're just ahead of people, but now I feel like the mass board gaming, gaming world has absolutely caught up. It's like, your Azules, your Roots, right? Your Pandemic.
They have moved Settlers was barely expanded or extended market. Like not mass market, but not core or niche market anymore. Right. By the end of the decade, those games are all like expanded market and Settlers is mass market.
You go to Target now and it's like the games are there, right? There they are, just in the store. The real games in the store where all the normal people go, right? Not the nerdy people. And
Yep.
there are still obviously even nerdier games that are the kinds that we're playing.
Well, look at us. We're always pushing deeper and further away from the masses. That's why we're playing train games.
Obviously. But it's like when Ticket to Ride came out, and we were playing it like a whole bunch in college, right?
That game would blow people's minds when we brought it to the table.
We played Ticket to Ride in college a whole bunch.
Yeah.
And it's like Ticket to Ride is not only not completely dead, it's still around. And now I think Ticket to Ride is just like on the shelf in the toy store. If there is, Toys R Us is gone, but any store that it still exists, it's like Ticket to Ride is just like, probably out there, just like whatever. If all the families are buying it who aren't even,
I would say the tabletop gaming ecosystem and industry evolved, modernized, and became mature over the course of this decade in a way that it had never been before. But that meant some casualties. There were big consolidations. A lot of publishers went under. There was the whole industry has consolidated. And at the end of the decade, there aren't that many publishers.
No, not too many. And we're losing more, right?
Yep. But in parallel with this,
just gobbling everything up, right?
just like with tabletop RPGs, this wasn't like, oh, the indie games ate away at the mass market like the long running games. It was that the entire space got bigger. Like Magic the Gathering kept trucking along, bigger than ever, and it's just still going. And Magic did not lose people to all these other games. There's just more people playing tabletop games everywhere.
Yep. So that's
the convention scene changed a lot. Like PAX went from the big thing in Seattle to like the industry dominating event over the course of that decade. The first PAX East was in 2010.
Yep.
We did like 5 panels at that thing.
Of PAX, right? It's like barely was like we went our first PAXs in like
08. We went 0809, and then PAX was like, yo, we're doing a PAX East. Will you come and do panels?
PAX wasn't mega until like 2013, 2014.
Yep. PAX wasn't even selling out.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't until a few years in, and so this has been the decade of PAX. Also, PAX Unplugged came into existence. South and East came into existence.
And Australia. Every PAX that's not PAX West came into existence.
Exactly. They did not exist in the previous decade. They just weren't there.
And you can see in our personal lives, right at the end of the decade, we hard pivoted away from all the cons that weren't gaming cons and went to a lot of gaming cons, mostly PAXs, but also MagFest.
Yep. So yeah, what else was like the huge thing going on in this decade, right?
I mean, I can go deep into a bunch of areas. But yeah, what?
So I mean, personally, right? So my personal pattern of gaming, right, is in the early part of the decade. What was I doing? I was playing mostly. I would get games for my Wii or DS.
Yep.
And I beat them or not play them at all.
Yeah.
Forget they existed somehow. Like the other day, I was watching. I think it was a few maybe months ago. Actually, I was watching someone speedrun WarioWare for the Wii. Not WarioWare, just Wario Shake It for the Wii, I think. And I was like, I feel like I've seen this game. I don't remember it. But I've seen it. And it's like I had it for the Wii. I played it, beat it, and then never played it again. Right.
But like at the end of the previous decade, I just wasn't. I was only playing old retro games and tabletop games, and I wasn't playing a lot of video games. And right at the beginning of 2010,
playing a lot of video games early in the 2010s at all. I was just, I'd play these mega games like, Mario Galaxy, whatever, when it came out, I'd beat it and I'd be done with it. And now, occasionally, right?
Civ 5 came out, played it.
Yeah, I played my DS before I went to bed, stuff like that.
Yeah, but as the decade went on, what really the thing that my personal journey of gaming, the strongest one, is that the multi-classed competitive team-based FPS, which had been dead, that genre had been dead. Team Fortress 2.
There was one game that you played.
There were multiple games in that genre, but they were all variants on a theme, and it was just kind of dead. Team Fortress 2 came out.
Team Fortress 2 came out last decade.
Yeah, it came out and wasn't great. And then and even then, those games were only popular among like people who were obsessed with that specific narrow area of gaming. Like that was not common for people to play those games.
TF2 was for a guy was really popular, and people were playing it with the hats.
Yeah, when TF2 came out, it was like The audience that played TF2 was not the audience that played those older games. Overwatch brought back a type of game that had been pretty much dead and even in its heyday was not widely played and made it mass market. This was the decade, the second half of this decade was the decade of actually finally stealing from the Forgotten Masters. This was the decade where all the forgotten genres and forgotten games, someone with money said, I'm going to pay some people to make a game that does this thing because there aren't any. If we just make it, someone will play it. No one will compete with us. And we see that across like all gaming. Dead genres were revived.
Yeah, we didn't get the Pokemon MMO, but we got Pokemon Go.
Yep.
And Pokemon itself does have more multiplayer internet stuff now than it ever has.
Yep.
Even though it's not the full MMO that you would imagine, right, in like this perfect cyber world.
I still imagine that. That's the only unrealized potential. That is egregious.
But so I started out, just playing some Nintendo games, right? I guess I was playing some of those indie games on the Xbox that I had for a while that I got rid of, right? And tabletop wise, it's like in the early 2010s, we were going to like, tabletop game night and playing, a Puerto Rico with some people, right? It's like
we used to, Nerd NYC was a thing. Those events all kind of died over the course of the 2010s.
Right. We were doing those, sort of smaller time board game meetup things. And then
I saw that trend kind of generally though, like smaller board game meetups declined as the decade went on. For a lot of reasons.
To me personally, the reason I abandoned them was because I spent 4 to 5 years playing Netrunner.
You did. You went deep in the Netrunner, just like I went deep into Overwatch.
Right. So Netrunner was a huge game. I think 2013 is when it started. I want to say. I'm guessing. I feel like 2013 through late 17, and I sort of waned off towards this.
I remember you'd go to a Netrunner meetup, and I would go to Nerd NYC and play like German games.
Well, because Netrunner was just a great game that I discovered, but also there was activity around it, right? Enough of it, and also, it was like, hey, instead of going to a board game meetup where I'll play who knows what game, and I'll play one game all night with some drunken people I don't know, I can play this game, which keeps changing and is really dynamic, interesting, and deep with people that all know the rules and all own the game and all really want to play it a lot, right? And are on a weekly, there was at the peak, we were having like tournaments every, like it was big. There were 2 tournaments a month and shit going down. It was like very active. And then it sort of, tapered off over time, but
yeah,
that occupied a lot of my time, that one game. And now, okay, I don't need to go back to that. I'm good.
That decade. Cause I too, like, in my younger days, there would be like one game, usually a competitive game, that would dominate all my multiplayer play, and I'd like focus on that game and play a lot of single player games. That came back for both of us in the past decade because I like went crazy for Overwatch. I still kind of play Overwatch like every day, to the exclusion of a lot of other online games. But at the beginning of the decade, I did that too because Counter-Strike Go came out at the beginning of the decade. Bringing back Counter-Strike and making it like, honestly, Counter-Strike Go is probably the second best Counter-Strike.
Probably.
I think 1.6 is the...
Go came into existence. I think I mentioned that already.
Yeah. And Ingress came and went in that time too.
Oh,
I found our review of it where basically my exact words were, don't play it, it's a candy box.
Sure. We saw a lot of... all the Jack boxes, that's all 2010s, right? There was the original You Don't Know Jack in the 90s, right? But 2010s, Jack box, right?
Yeah.
It's a totally different, new, revolutionary thing that's been absolutely...
They figured out how to make WebSockets kind of just work, and no one seems to have mastered this except them.
Obviously, 2010s, phone games, right? There were phones in late 2000s, but smartphones weren't, like I said in a tech episode, were not huge.
I think the 3DS was the last, like, super small portable console because phones completely displaced that entire market.
Phone adoption, and it was the thing of the 2010s, and thus games on the smartphones. Candy Crush might be the game of the decade, honestly.
Yep.
Right. If you think about it, I don't, it's close, right? What else would even be close on the list in terms of like, you have to pick one game to represent the whole decade for the population of humanity, right? That might be it.
Yep. But that, like the 3DS, I think was the last small console that normal people would play. And the 3DS had its ups and downs in this decade. Like the local multiplayer didn't work because Nintendo's bad at that.
Yep. It was still huge though.
It was huge. The 3D thing obviously didn't matter, but the console itself was fine. But now look what happened. We've seen this. The industry is segmented into, there's basically two consoles that are just gaming PCs that compete with each other with time-limited exclusives that'll usually be on Steam eventually. There's PC gaming, which is continuing to grow in a big way. Like, I'm so happy that PC gaming is so big again for a lot of reasons that we've talked about over the entire decade. And then there's Nintendo. Nintendo is doing its own thing. And the Switch is like this perfect marriage of form and function that I think Nintendo found their niche, and I doubt they will do anything that is not Switch-like anytime in the foreseeable future.
Well, Nintendo saw, the Wii U go poop, and they're like, hey, we need to make something, right, that in an era, right, where someone can buy a computer and someone has a phone.
Yep.
Right.
If someone has a gaming PC or a PlayStation...
Someone has a computer and a phone, we need to make a device that they will buy. Right?
Yep.
In addition to those two things. And so they do it, right? And I think Nintendo's obvious real advantage there is sort of, like, just not only is the Switch hardware, so unique in providing, features that and experiences you couldn't get on normal hardware, right? More commodity hardware. It's that they still have their Marios, their Zeldas, and all those games.
Yep.
100% exclusive to their platform. So.
Yep. And we've said, like, I don't want to go too deep in Nintendo, but the other thing they did is with Breath of the Wild, they like broke the concept of what an open world game could be for everyone who's ever made one up to that point.
Mm-hmm. Other notable big things from the decade.
Esports. Right? Esports went from only nerds care to more watched than the Super Bowl.
That's true.
Like that is that people aren't like people. I don't think realize younger kids already do not seem to realize that esports didn't fucking exist in the previous decade in any meaningful way.
No, not in a meaningful way, right? There was like Fatality in his Quake playing.
Yeah,
right?
like Fatality. That's one of the only esports people could name from that era, and even then, only like Quake people knew.
It was StarCraft and Quake, and that was pretty much it. And
yep.
Now it's everything. So yeah, other notable things, right? So obviously, most recently, we've had train games because of one website, but that's just, I think, a larger in our eyes because we're deep into that. And the grander scheme, it's not actually that big, but it's grown proportion to its previous.
We've
size.
seen digital implementations of board games become good when previously they were often shitty, and become kind of the most common way someone will learn to play a popular board game is they'll play it on an app first on their phone or tablet, learn the rules, and then move on to playing it with people. Like that's a thing that wasn't a thing before.
We've seen the roguelike become a bigger deal in the 2010s, right? So many, roguelike used to just be NetHack, and now it's everything. Right?
But that's it. That's another. It's like rogue, like the things that made rogue interesting, mashed into some other genre in some way.
Escape rooms are a big thing if you consider those to be a game.
Yeah.
Then many escape rooms are still a thing now, right? They've actually been able to sort of hold on to their power in whatever form they take, tabletop, digital, or physical. They're all the same sort of thing.
I think that's part of a broader trend where we're in the era where people who are around our age who actually started going out and making games and founding studios and like doing this stuff. So the people who grew up wanting more games and had access to games and were deep into that games, like we have this like second generation of people making those games now.
Yep. The roll and write game became a thing. I think it's sort of faded a little bit, but there are some recent entries.
Well, it turned into a bubble where there were like 10 of them published in one month. I remember, like.
Yeah. There was an explosion.
I mean, Yahtzee was a roll and write. Yahtzee's been around for a while, but roll and writes were not played by people who weren't playing old, weird games like Yahtzee with their families until this decade.
Right. Phenomenon-wise, Goose Game was just huge, right? Talking about the indie games, right? Where we started with the braids. We went from braid to Goose Game, right? So, because when I started talking about the indie game, revolution of the 2010s, I was mostly thinking about where we came from. But it's like, we got to Goose Game. That's where we are now, where something like that is now just known by everybody. Everyone knows the Goose Game. All right, everyone played that. Is there anyone who didn't play it? No one listened to the show. I doubt it, right?
I think we, though, did see the rise and then fall, like kind of hard fall of a lot of rhythm games. Like rhythm games had a lot of trouble this decade.
Well,
DDR kind of disappeared from like crazy
games
popular
have-
consciousness.
rhythm games have bounced back to a more like, up.
But they're more like tablet tapping type rhythm games.
No, well, some of them are, but it's like DDR itself has like sort of, come off the ground and gone to a plateau, right? It's like you
Yep.
can get there is the main current DDR machine. It exists, right?
But there aren't arcades.
No, well, there are some, but it's not where it was in the 2000s where you could get everyone had plastic instruments, right?
Yep. Like
In their
at the very
house.
beginning of the decade, like Rock Band 3 was like the hottest game.
Dance pads at the store just normally, right? It's like that stuff was all 2000s. 2010s, everyone threw out their plastic instruments.
Yep. And only hardcore people had people like DDR enthusiasts have special DDR pads. No one else plays DDR.
The genre is sort of stable at this like level, right? It's probably equal to like the train game situation.
Yeah.
Right? Where only the train games are going up from where they are, and the rhythm games are going down from where they were.
Though,
But it's a niche thing that's holding steady, and there has a community, and it's there, right?
though there are a small number of rhythm game crossed with something else, getting back into that genre mixing stuff. Like Pistol Whip is a rhythm rail shooter.
Mm-hmm. Oh, speaking of which, right? It's like, yeah, while I'm not a big fan of VR, and I don't think
I was going to bring this up last.
Yeah, well,
VR VR is not mass market, but
No,
VR is like legit expanded market gaming now.
Yeah, VR is, pretty much like, people talk. It used to be just like, oh, there's like VR. You can buy VR for $1 zillion in this one game. And now it's sort of like, all right, if you got a pile of money, you can play Star Wars in VR, right? It's a whole bunch of VR games.
Star Wars was, I think, the turning point between Star Wars and the Quest 2, because the Quest and the Quest 2 were you can do VR without a gaming PC and without a bunch of nerd shit like putting sensors on the walls. It'll just work. And they're really popular. Like VR is more accessible than high-end PC gaming right now.
Probably.
An Oculus Quest 2 costs way less than a low-end gaming PC.
Sure.
But high-end VR is still, like, I have a Valve Index. That is for nerds. But Star Wars was probably the first game that was a, like, expanded market, like, edging into, but not quite mass market. Like, this game was launched. And they just said, you know what? It works with VR. If you have VR, any VR headset, it just works. We designed it for that, but you don't need it. And that is a big sign. The next decade, I think we're going to see VR. By the end of next decade, VR will be mass market if the world is not destroyed.
It depends, right? If it remains an expensive thing that is a big fat thing you got to put on your head,
but it's already not. You could the Quest is cheap and doesn't need a gaming PC. It costs less than some gaming consoles.
How much does it cost?
Let me see. The Quest 1 is real cheap now.
More than a PS5.
Probably less than a PS5. Quest 2 is $300. It's way less than a PS5.
All right. That's not too bad, but it's still quite a bit to spend for something with so few games.
Doesn't cost that much more than a Switch, and there's a decent number. There's a lot of games out now.
Does the Switch have, right? Versus how many games the VR games are there?
Yeah, that's why I'm saying by the end of this coming decade.
Well, it depends, right? So I'm saying if VR, in order for VR to sort of, it's got upwards momentum for sure, right? Where it, before it was just like a nothing, like people were really reaching for it, right? It's like this could be Virtual Boy you're buying here with your money, right?
Yeah, but now it kind of just works.
It's not Virtual Boy 2. It's definitely reached, like, I think maybe PSP territory, right? Where it's like, it's going to have a lot of games. It's not going to just die, right? It's like it's useful.
Well,
right?
but even more, the studios are all like currently researching to make the big games in the coming decade.
Yeah, but unlike the PSP, there is platform enthusiasm for VR, right? Software developers working on it and such, right? Pretty much across the board, except for Nintendo, right? Pretty much, everyone's into VR, right?
Yep.
Trying to make things for it. But I think unless it needs like another big bump or two in terms of price down, tons of more games.
Which it's gonna get. What it's lacking at the end of this decade is a large enough ecosystem of studios that have mastered the craft of making VR games and mastered the UX and like how the games work.
It could, but the point is, if it doesn't get 1 or 2 boosts, it could still go down, right?
Those boosts are dead. That R&D is already there. Those games are already in flight and not
At
announced.
the end of 2030, we could either be saying like, "Oh, VR almost made it," but no, it didn't make it. They got to try again a third time.
No, I think VR is going to
to.
start displacing some other games by the end of this coming decade.
I'm not too confident about that.
I am very confident in that.
Yes, you bought a VR. That's why you're confident.
Now, also because of how well it's selling. The Quest 2
buys the wine, right? Likes it no matter what it tastes like, right?
No, the Quest 2 is selling like crazy to normal people. In fact,
like crazy. How many is it selling?
Well,
how many sell more than Wii U's?
It definitely sold more than Wii U's because the Wii U didn't sell for shit.
How many did it sell?
It's still selling. We don't have the holiday numbers yet.
How many Wii U's sold? Wii U's.
Well, we both saw that chart on Wii U's.
101 million Wii U. Oh no, that was Wii's.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I was like, that's not Wii. The Wii U sold.
Quest 2 appears to be approaching 10 mil.
Oh, that's Wii U games. I saw this recently. How many Wii U's were sold? It was some millions, right? Total Wii U's sold. I don't know.
Yeah,
millions. Right.
The Quest 2 appears to have sold 2 mil at around launch, and is tracking to hit 10 mil like early next year.
The number of Wii U's sold by the end, it was like 5 million.
All right, so the projected Quest 2 numbers by sometime next year is double that.
10 million Wii U's.
That's the best number I can find. They sold out 2 million at launch, and then they ran it. They couldn't make more. Like they were sold out. People couldn't get them.
All right. Well, the Wii U was a failure, so it has to do. I guess
they expect to sell 3 million more in next year. That's a better number I found.
So 2 million at launch, 3 million next year.
So that'll match the Wii U in the first year, basically.
All right, so it's not a complete bomb like the Wii U, but you need a lot more than that to be like a smash, right?
But here, it's not a smash yet. It's definitely like niche to expanded market.
And it's saying, will it be tens of millions, right? They need to make some development that will get that number to the tens of millions and not just the ones of.
I think that is one more iteration of the hardware that does not require a gaming PC being better. Because if you have a gaming PC, VR is already there, but that's not what most people are going to interact with. They're going to interact with these standalone systems that just work without having to do any gamer nerd nonsense. There is some evidence, as I'm poking around, that those non-PC tethered VR kits are selling to people who don't otherwise have gaming systems.
Makes sense. Why would you, if you have a gaming system, why would you buy, right? If you have a gaming system, you also want to get your use out of it, right?
Yep.
Why would you? So,
but I think it's one more iteration of the inside-out tracking hardware for non-PC gamer enthusiasts, coupled with like 2 studios releasing multiple games over the next several years, like real games, like full-on games. We need like 5 more games that are on the level of Half-Life Alyx.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that was. Is there anything else big time that happened in the 2010s? Right?
I think the story is that gaming has become hugely important to culture and society, and as an industry has grown massively. There's more players, there's more makers. The one bad thing, but this is not new, the same thing was happening in the previous decade. The industry is unsustainable in terms of like crunch and working practices and capital.
Right. Also, your Gamergate was in the 2010s. That was right.
Yep. And gamer harassment like exploded, but that's more. We'll talk about that more on Thursday, I think, because Gamergate was not the thing. That was just the like trial run for what really happened.
Sure, but I think what has happened is, on the one hand, right, both the bad people in this world, right, got stronger and went to war, right?
Yep.
But also you can view it in the other way, in that the good people weren't just sitting around taking it anymore. Just letting the status quo maintain.
Yep. Like look at how Blizzard has handled harassment issues in their games in this decade compared to how any fucking company handled that in the previous decade. The companies are increasingly doing as much of the right thing as they can with like banning first and asking questions later, taking reports seriously, building reporting and accountability systems into their games. It's not fully developed yet.
If I could make an analogy, right? Basically, there's been this like wasp hive on the porch. It's just been there, right? It's just been sitting there this whole time, and every time you leave your house, you watch out for the wasps, and that was the status quo of the 2000s. Was you just watching out for the wasps? And the 2010s, we both tried to get rid of the wasps actively, right? We didn't necessarily succeed completely, right? But we got a lot of them. But we also got stung by a lot of wasps.
Yup.
Right, and that was the 2010s. So hopefully, 2020s. We want to see a world where you can walk out on your porch and no wasps. That's what we're aiming for.
But I think the sad part is I think that is way beyond gaming. I think the gamer culture was just sort of ahead of the curve of these societal problems.
The gaming community was a particular nexus that other community, the anime community had its own, but they were much smaller.
I think part of the difference is the gaming community, where this stuff really like germinated, was hyper social online, a little bit ahead of general ass society being hyper social online with social media.
Yep.
Like gamers were harassing each other and Gamergate stuff was happening in social media when gaming was still overrepresented compared to other things in social media.
Well, all that stuff was 2010s though. 2000s, not so much, right?
Yep. 2000s, like harassment was like an individual person would bother you in a specific game and you couldn't interact with them otherwise.
And people would say racial slurs in the chat.
Yep. And you'd mute them and block them and kick them off your servers, but they couldn't find you in real life.
It was just how it was. That was just life in the 2000s.
Yep.
Right? So
I would like play Counter-Strike on servers that had passwords where people were vetted.
Yep. Anyway, let's move on
to another decade.
To sleepy times.